life has a way of kind of piling back on.
But everybody's got something where there's a barrier that gets in our way. And then we start living with the barrier, and pretty soon it seems like life is about that barrier.
And it's truly our work to continue to peel those layers off so we can stay in our purest form.
Those kinds of things can be real barriers until you learn how to surf them in a way that's congenial to everybody.
Friends, today I have a friend to all of us named Gay Hendricks. He has had a journey in his life that I wanted to share because there's so many golden nuggets that we can take from it to apply to our own. I'm sure if you've been around, you've probably bought one of his courses, maybe even one of his books. If you've been lucky enough, you've gone to one of his retreats. So listen in to hear our story of Gay today. So hello, my friend.
Hi, it's great to be with you, Jen.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. Your story, I read it and I'm like, this is a person that understands struggle, understands limiting beliefs, and has figured out a way to navigate them and rewrite the story. And that's that's how I fell in love with you in the first place. Every single piece of content you put out kind of re-solidifies that feeling. So thank you for all the work that you do and share with the world.
Thank you. Back at you. Thank you so much for all the wisdom that you put out on the airwaves.
Yes. Okay, so I think the fun thing about your story is your personal one. So can you bring our listeners up to speed on your journey of weight loss that transformed your entire life?
Yes. Well, it's almost to the day 54 years ago when I had a magical experience that changed everything. And if you look at me today, I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh about 180 pounds. I look athletic. I work out at the gym 3 days a week. So, you'd say he's definitely a fit old codger, probably, if you looked at me. And but if you roll back the clock 54 years ago, I weighed more than 300 pounds, about 320 pounds. I was stuck in a really awful relationship that I'd been in for a couple of years, and I couldn't figure out how to get out of, almost literally, because I couldn't afford to go somewhere else and live. And so that was a way of being stuck. I also went out of my way to make myself unhealthy. I smoked 2 or 3 packs of Marlboros a day in addition to overeating. And so I pretty much had everything upside down and backwards in my life. And I'd actually been born into the weight problem. When my mother was first pregnant with me, my father died unexpectedly at age 32 and sent her into a grief spiral where she stopped eating for a number of months and lived on coffee and cigarettes herself. And finally, my grandmother, who lived next door, kind of got her eating again. But during the course of her pregnancy with me, my mother started out at 120 pounds. And by the time she had me, she weighed only 89 pounds. And so she really starved herself during the pregnancy. And the doctors think that it reset some kind of thermostat in my hypothalamus that made me gain weight just as a survival tool. Because by the end of my first year of life, I was one of those really fat babies, like the top 1 or 2% of my baby weights. And so I continued to be obese throughout elementary school on through high school. And so, as I said, by the time I got up into my 20s, I'd had every possible medical intervention. For a year, they put me on amphetamines, and I did lose weight, but gosh, I couldn't go to sleep till about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd be up awake again at 6. And, I was totally frazzled all the time, but I did lose a bunch of weight on him, but it was unsustainable. So I made this momentous decision when I was 24 years old that I wanted to change that, to take on the responsibility for changing it. And how that came to pass is that one day I went out for a walk to clear my head all 320 pounds of me, heavily smoker. I had the big argument with the woman I lived with at the time, Linda. And so I was going out to clear my head, and I slipped and fell on a place where the snow was covering the ice on the road that I lived on in New England at the time. And I went down, whoop, on my back. And I hit my head. I didn't knock myself out, fortunately, but I did see stars. And a 320-pound person weighs approximately what your refrigerator weighs. And so when it hits the ground, boom, that's a big thing. And it knocked me out of my normal perception of myself. And I had this amazing 2 minutes, it couldn't have been longer than 2 or 3 minutes experience, where instead of my usual self, I had this, it was like I had a microscope looking down through myself. And I could see how my fat, my layer had, maybe 6 inches of fat, and there was these muscles that were all tight because I was resisting feeling all of these feelings underneath there. All the sadness I was carrying and grief about my father and my mother, how it had totally knocked the joy out of her life, I think permanently. And, she had gotten more into addictions as a result after my father died. And so, in a way, I don't think I ever knew her because she was, going through the filter of those addictions. And so that left an immense grief in me. And I could also feel anger and sadness and a big fear that I was going to replay my father's life and die when I was 32. And there I was, 24, already making a mess out of my life. So I might not have even made it to 32. But that was what happened in this magical 2 or 3 minutes where I lay on the ice, and it was like I could see down through all these levels. But then, Jen, here's the real magic. At the bottom of everything in myself, I saw this space, which I call pure consciousness, which we all have, which is the real us that's underneath all of our layers of programming. It's a total accident that you were born in the house you were born in, and I was born in the other house next door. It could have been the other way around. Think of what have happened, but there would still be that pure consciousness, even though the outward circumstances were different. So that opened up for me. I'd never realized that before. And that was a huge moment because it changed my whole perception of myself. I was, instead of a 320-pound sack of meat, I was consciousness with a bunch of learned history around me that I could unpeel and clear up. That's the new way I saw myself. And then after that 2 minutes, I started coming back to my regular personality. I could feel how I wanted to smoke a cigarette, and I could feel how the back of my head hurt where I'd banged it. And oh gosh, I got to walk a mile back to the house, and I'm freezing to death. And, I could feel all this coming back on, but I could feel that pure consciousness too. And in that moment, I did something that every human being can do. I didn't know how to do it, but I invented it for myself at the time. I made a commitment to something bigger than myself, to something that I didn't know if I could do. I made a commitment to living in that space of pure consciousness all the time, and to getting rid and clearing out everything that was in the way